what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Exchange on the Mesh Podcast Network, a monthly conversation about startups and small business with ideas, tools, and advice to operate your business more effectively. On today's show, podcasting. You're listening to one, but can doing a podcast or getting involved with podcasts help your business? Most importantly, it's our annual Business Lessons from the Movies Podtacular edition, and we'll be joined by the founders of Footcandle Film Society, Alan Jackson and Chris Frye. We'll give you some movie ideas to make it through the holidays with a minimum of conversation with your in-laws. Finally, we'll end up with our Small Business of the Month feature where we'll highlight some interesting businesses that you should be checking out. Welcome. My name is Jeff Neuville. I'm your co-host. I'm the director of the Small Business Center at Catawba Valley Community College in Hickory, North Carolina. I'm joined by my co-host, Gary Muller, who is Dean of the School of Business, Industry, and Technology at Catawba Valley Community College. Gary, happy holidays. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I always look forward to this podcast.
It is one of our favorite times of the year.
Yes, it is.
You know, and you know, for our listeners out there, Gary does have his holiday tie on today.
That's right. I thought we were going to be on TV.
It's as usual. This is still audio,
I forgot. You know, slow.
That's probably our best medium. But anyway,
that's for sure.
And we also want to welcome Chris Frye, Alan Jackson are here with us as well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us here today.
And Chris and Alan are founders of the Footcandle Film Society. They also have their own podcast where they talk about films. It's Footcandle Films. Footcandle Films.
It just all kind of rolls together there. So yeah,
and where can we find Footcandle Films?
Oh, I believe you can find it on themesh.tv, which is the same podcast network in which you're listening to this wonderful show.
Plus iTunes.
Yeah,
plus
there's
iTunes.
A startup iTunes that's part of another startup, Apple.
Okay.
You may have heard of, but yeah.
Why don't you save that for our Small Business of the Month feature? We'll get to that. But since we're talking about podcasts, we always like, before we get into the meat of our Podtacular, we like to talk a little bit about business or a business article. And Time Magazine recently came out with an article where they listed their 10 most popular podcasts of the year. And for the fifth consecutive year, we're not on it. We're not on it again.
We're going to name the other 8 because of our 2 podcasts.
No, you know, and
we specifically wrote them and said that we would like to be withdrawn from the list just because we just didn't want to embarrass the rest of the shows.
They wrote us and told us they didn't want us to.
I heard they contacted you and wanted to do an interview and were considering, and you said, unless we're not going to go that road.
No, exactly.
On full day.
That's right. Well, yeah, we're just going to pass this year.
Either we're in or forget about it. That's how we roll. But we're not in it this year. And Gary, I really probably blame you for this. That you've really not done a good job of marketing us. And I guess secondly, I blame our listeners for really not making a ruckus about this. But we encourage them to contact the failing Time Magazine and to tell them that Entrepreneur Exchange needs to be there.
That'll be our goal for 2018.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good goal to have for next year.
Interestingly, of their top 10, I sort of went through their top 10, and I really weren't any podcasts on there that I would characterize as business podcasts, which there's an opening for us there.
There we go.
So, 5 I would say are more cultural,
You don't deem us to be cultural?
And maybe in a backwards type way. I don't know. 2 might be more news-oriented, 1 education, 1 drama, 1 comedy. According to that, their list, their number 1 was binge mode Game of Thrones. So if you're a Game of Thrones fan and you wanted to catch up, that's how you would have caught up. So.
Well, and the key for that, the reason I think that particular type of show is so popular, or podcast is going to be at the top of the list is, for people who are a fan of the show or any show really, podcasting is probably one of the quickest ways for them to hear a dialogue about that show right after it airs. I mean, you could have a podcast out the very next morning of an episode the night before. So I think the timeliness of it, and of course the fact that it's a popular show, help drive that. But the thing is, that's not going to be the number 1 podcast in the seasons when the show is not being aired. So it's going to be a very seasonal thing to it. Yeah.
Well, I also was wrapped up in that internet thing and came across some statistics from a group called Edison Research that was just doing findings on podcast listeners, how many people are listening to podcasts. So we'll throw some statistics out there. Now, 67 million Americans listen to podcasts monthly, which is up 14%. And 24% of Americans aged 12 or older listen to podcasts monthly. So you'll be thinking about your target market out there. 42 million Americans now listen to podcasts weekly, which is 15% of the U.S. population. And they made note of the fact that only 3% of Americans go to movies weekly, which they're probably either movie nuts like Alan and Chris, or extremely wealthy people that can afford to go to movies on a weekly basis. Podcast listening is skewing less young. In 2017, for the first time, a larger percentage of the 25 to 54-year-old group was listening to podcasts. 31% of that group was listening to podcasts in the 12 to 24 age group. So that's the first time that age group was sort of the middle age group, that some of us are still members of, but exceeded the younger group. Podcasts are more popular among men. 27% of American men have listened to podcasts in the last month compared to 21% of women.
That's interesting.
2/3 of podcasts are listened to on a phone or tablet, so you need to make sure that you are on iTunes.
Yes.
And this was interesting. 85% of listeners hear all or most of a podcast. So people are actually, if they're starting the podcast, they're generally getting to the end or close to the end.
Interesting.
Right, because they want to hear those small businesses.
Well, I understand in our case.
So
Right.
So
You got to get the full experience.
full experience. So anyway, if podcasting, if the demographics match up with your business, which isn't for everybody, but whether you're thinking about providing content, doing advertising, sponsorships on a particular podcast, there's probably some opportunity to promote your business. So we're probably biased, but we're pro podcasting here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and I think too, just I can interject here that the advent of internet-connected TVs continues to be on the rise, and more of these devices, whether it's an Apple TV box, whether it's Amazon Fire TVs, all have podcasting capabilities built in. So you think about it, yes, I think you said 2/3 listen on mobile, phone, tablet. But there's also going to be, I think, an influx of people watching or listening even on their TV sets. If the whole key is how easy can you get to it. If it's 1 or 2 clicks and you can be listening to a podcast, your chances of getting into new households or people that normally haven't listened to that are going to increase dramatically. So having it on the TV, having it on the phones, having it on your computers, it's got to be pervasive and it's got to be easy. And I think it's getting there more and more every year. So,
well, there was also another interesting statistic in here, which I didn't, I gave you the abridged version, but 52% of all podcasts are listened to at home. As opposed to in the car or at work or something like that. So that sort of might support some of what you're saying there.
Well, and definitely on the TV set, of course, video podcasts are going to become a little more prominent there too. When you think about it, it's just podcasting is broadcasting at a smaller level, but still with national or international exposure. So it's I think it's still a fascinating field. I'm anxious to see where it goes going forward.
No. We'll continue to be here, or so we hope.
Awesome. That's great.
But let's get to our main topic today, which is business lessons from the movies. Here's our basic premise. We all love the holiday season. We enjoy spending quality time with friends and family and giving gifts and getting gifts. But at some point, there's going to come a time when you need a break, as opposed to sticking a fork in one of your in-laws. Why don't we turn on the TV or go to the movies and catch some movies? And our job is to give you some movie ideas that you can share with your family and take a little bit of a break that hopefully will provide you some sort of business lesson as we go through, or some sort of moral or something in there, or something to think about from business. So those sort of are guidelines. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business movie, but we'll sort of see where the conversation goes, and we don't really spend a lot of time sharing notes before we start this, so we never really know where the conversation is going to go.
So is it possible we all chose the same film? I mean, I'm just saying, is that a possibility?
It is possible.
Some of us chose more than one, and I suspect you guys did as well, just in case that was.
I hope we all didn't choose the same two, so that would be awkward.
I'm pretty confident.
We're going to let our guests start first. So, Alan, would you like to kick us off with one of your movie choices? I
would love to, and I'll tell you, this is how many years have we been doing this now? This is fourth year.
It's fourth year.
Fourth year. Okay, so
it's getting harder.
I'm finding it a little harder to do every year because honestly, my choices the first 3 years were so perfect that it's hard to find like more now to supplement those. Okay,
if you chose one from 3 years ago, I'm not sure our listeners would call
That's true. Oh, I could have just done that. We could have just taken the clip from 3 years ago and just played it again.
People rewrite.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So let me jump in. I had to go a little outside of the norm of what may be on the surface considered a business movie. What I just tended to do for this year is pick two that I felt like gain some incredible, valuable insight for a business person or entrepreneur, even if you don't really think of these as specifically business movies. So the first one is the film 12 Angry Men. This is the 1957 Sidney Lumet film with Henry Fonda. And, pretty popular film, very famous film. I'll just give a little quick summary in case anybody is not familiar with it or has never had a chance to see it. It's the defense and the prosecution have arrested, and the jury's filing into a jury room to decide if a young man is innocent or guilty. And what happens is basically all the action of the film takes place inside the jury deliberation room, where everybody's on one consensus path about deciding that this individual's guilty, except for one juror. And the whole movie is their process of taking this one juror and his efforts to try to work and convince the rest of the jury his viewpoint. So what I really see from it, why I've always thought it's a great movie for business, is the power of persuasion, it's the power of leadership. I mean, it's understanding how to deal with diverse opinions and ideas, because we all know that's so prevalent in the business world. You've got to know how to compromise and sometimes persuade and take a leadership role, even in situations where, maybe you weren't prepared for that, but you find yourself having to make some tough decisions. So to me, this whole psychology of group behavior, working with a group, working with a team, value systems of the people, how you make important decisions, negotiations. I mean, all of that is just reflected in this film, even though there's no mention of a business or a company in any way. Mm-hmm. Those values and those traits are really, I think, important for any entrepreneur or somebody in a leadership role in the business community. So I love the film. It's a classic, but and it didn't dawn on me the first 3 years we did this, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, heck yeah, that's a business movie. That's a great business values movie. So 12 Angry Men from 1957. Yeah, just classic.
Was that ever remade for?
It was.
Okay.
It wasn't that good.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I think it was like a TV movie. It wasn't like a theatrical film release.
Seems like I remember it being out again at some point. But
yeah, I mean, you just
stick with Henry Fonda.
You stick with Henry Fonda. Absolutely. It's a classic. I mean, I love, from just a film standpoint, I mean, I think the entire film takes place inside this one room, and just how the room becomes a character, and the heat, and having the fan going, and people are getting sweaty in there. I mean, it's just you feel a little claustrophobic, but at the same time, you really get to know these individuals, these jurors. They do a great job of setting these characters up to know who they are, like, right away. So it's a great classic film.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right, Chris, what you got?
So mine is also, you wouldn't consider it to be a business movie, but it definitely has some lessons, and it just came out this year, and it's called Okja. And I'll go ahead and spell that because it's kind of a weird name for a movie. It's Okja. And it's an action-adventure drama that did really well at Sundance, and Netflix bought it. So I'll get to that little business part here in a second. But the business lessons that you can kind of, glean from the movie, it's about a corporation who is trying to redo themselves. Okay, so they've already gone through the entrepreneurship change, and they're this huge corporation, and the very beginning of the movie is them kind of rebranding themselves. And that first 10 minutes of the movie is like a genius marketing campaign that you could probably watch and learn from. But the problem with it is they don't really change. So they have this big kind of Steve Jobs keynote type thing that's just glaring. You're like, whoa. And but underlying that, they really don't change. And that comes back to get them in the end of the movie. So something to consider.
Also not uncommon in the real world.
When you're rebranding yourself, try to make sure that you're actually making a change. You are doing what you say you are going to do, because if you don't, it's probably going to come back and get you. So the movie is a very interesting movie. Now this gets over to another business perspective, and Alan can chime in because we've actually talked a little bit about it. Netflix is becoming more and more a buyer of movies. And that's interesting because with this film or with another film, Mudbound, that just came out within the past 2 weeks, they have the possibility of maybe winning Oscars. So that's totally going to change the way movie distribution is done. And it could be a pretty big deal. So it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of months. And already they're getting movies. They go to Sundance. They go to all these different film festivals and buy things straight from there. And they may never go to the movie theater, and they release them just online. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting shift in movie distribution to watch.
It is something we're keeping an eye on because obviously it changes how theaters operate to some degree. It changes how people view movies and how movies can be distributed. So
I just fear that ultimately the impact will be that it'll cost me $12 for my popcorn instead of $8 for my popcorn when I go to the theater.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the only recourse, unfortunately, the theaters may have. And anyway, that's a whole other topic. But yes, I think it's an interesting moment. Now, Chris, of course, let's just make sure everybody understands. The film is about a giant genetically modified pig. Okay, yes. So just to go ahead and lay that out there.
That's who Oak
left that part out. You sort of
right.
Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, that was, we were burying the lead on this one. Yes, that's the film.
Of course, you might have lost the other messages if you started with that.
That's true. It's a great choice, but it's also a very interesting, entertaining film. Japanese film. But yes, it's about a giant, huge genetically modified pig.
Very clever of Chris to use that one early before Gary and I. It was on our list as well.
I just didn't want anybody firing it up saying, "Oh, this is a business movie and Steve Jobs thing," and all of a sudden there's giant pigs everywhere.
So have to dance here and you take that one.
So I have a choice to tell my wife it's either The Wolf of Wall Street or Okja for Christmas Day.
Oh, Okja is a much better. It's a much better Christmas movie than Wolf of Wall Street, but I think just about any movie could probably be a better Christmas movie than Wolf of Wall Street.
That'll be with me for the rest of my life. That decision. So speaking of decisions,
go ahead.
I went back to 1993 and The Firm.
Oh yeah, sure.
Tom Cruise. It's about a law firm, but it's about ethics, and it's a great movie, a great message, and very entertaining, and a message of tax fraud and money laundering and the things that go on in law firms as well as other businesses.
Yeah, that was I remember that one. And
young Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
it was young Tom Cruise,
yeah, 24 years ago.
And I remember watching it, and probably that was one of the earlier movies where I really felt like they got a lot deeper into the business machinations of things going on. It wasn't just somebody's doing something bad. It was like, okay, now here's actually what's happening and what's
kind of how he tried to cover himself.
Right.
Learn more about it.
Sort of lesson there. If a lot of the people in your firm are dying, you might have some issues. You have crazy explosion and accidents that bad things could be happening there.
But it's a good example if you get mesmerized or get into the culture and you don't think about because you're so much involved in what they're doing from a positive standpoint. I guess positive is not a good word, but that you want to ignore or don't pay attention to all the messages that are coming on, like people dying, and you start rationalizing that it might be okay until you're in too deep.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Good to know.
Some classic Tom Cruise on the table there. So
I guess I don't know if that was John Grisham's first book. I don't think A Time to Kill might have been before that, but it was one of his first books, and he's done well also.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so I was listening to the radio a few weeks ago, and the NPR Morning Edition show, they were revisiting an older movie that felt appropriate for the time, and I thought they said it was the 40th anniversary of it, but I went back, and this movie was released in 1980, 9 to 5, with
wow.
Dabney Coleman as like a sexist, bigoted, but not a very good boss to work for, and three women that work for him, played by Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda and Dolly Parton, and how he is basically mistreating them, harassing them, and being an overall bad dude. And and it's a comedy, and at the time it sort of seemed funny. Not so funny now.
I was going to say, I could see that looking through that from a whole different lens nowadays. Yeah,
and then on the public radio, asked some younger women to watch the movie and give their thoughts on it, and see, and it was, none of them went insane and said, I'm going to sue you for making me watch this movie. But, unfortunately, some of them did not see enough differences in today's workplaces as you would hope that they would at this point in time. And so anyway, it's just sort of a take, an interesting time capsule twist on the workplace of 30 years ago or so, and how we hope there have been some changes and impact. So it is a comedy, and it's got a fairly happy ending and resolution to it. So it's probably safe to watch with your family. But just sort of interesting generational type film, and one that might be interesting to watch with today's headlines. So,
because you've mentioned that film, I'm now going to have that song stuck in my head for the rest of the day.
For that, I apologize, Chris.
Yes.
So,
don't apologize. It's a good. It's a good song. Man, you're right. That film, I didn't even think about that, but that is an interesting one to go back and view now. So, it's a shame that people aren't seeing as much progress as maybe we had hoped by them, but
I think
interesting
there's
what
some progress. Yeah.
Interesting what kind of consisted as a comedy back at that time, and now you look at it as more of a, unfortunately, probably more of a documentary. So,
All right. So, Chris.
Okay.
Chris or Alan, I don't care.
Hey, go ahead, Chris. You go first.
So my next one is actually a documentary, and it's called Anvil: The Story of Anvil. And you're like, okay, that's good because I have no idea who Anvil would be, so I definitely need the story of them. Well, they've been a rock band since 1978, and they're from Canada. They went on tour in the early 80s with Bon Jovi, Scorpions, Whitesnake. You're like, okay, I've heard of those people, but I haven't heard of these people. They just, for some reason, never really hit it big, but they're still trying to make a go of it. And one of the guys is a construction worker, and the other guy delivers food for like a food service to like schools, and that's what they were doing. But when the documentary came out in 2008, they were trying to like make another album, and it was their struggles of still trying to do what they love and trying to make it come true. And I will not ruin the end of the movie for you, or the end of the documentary. But it's just really fascinating to see two people who really have a drive, who really love music. It's what they've always wanted to do. But they've had to work other jobs, but they still stick with the music. And although I am not a fan of their music, I am definitely a fan of the band because I just admire. You can tell these are real people. And so the business lesson was, if you have something you like to do and you can turn that passion into a career or something, try to stick with it, and you'll be. They are very obviously fulfilled by being able to keep their band together. So it's a funny documentary, sometimes unintentionally so. They go on a very disastrous, they get booked to do a European tour, and they're like, oh, this is going to be our big comeback. Doesn't go so well. But it's kind of like, a lot of people have said it's kind of like a real life Spinal Tap. I mean, it's like an actual band that has kind of the misfortunes of that fictional band. And so anyways, Anvil, the story of Anvil. I really liked it. I think the inspiration of trying to, follow your dreams and stuff is definitely in that film. So. Have you seen it?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I can attest to it. It's a good film. So.
I'm a sucker for the music rock type movies. So.
Yeah, you should see this. It's good. It's a very good one.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, what you got?
So I'll continue on the vein that Chris started of the documentaries that have something to do with show business. So I'm really excited about this one because to me, this as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, Jeff and Gary, I need to talk to them during the Podtacular celebration because this film fits in my mind perfectly. So there was a TV show back in, I don't remember the year. I think it was in the early 2000s. That was called The Dana Carvey Show. Dana Carvey, comedian. He was on Saturday Night Live for many, many years. Big, very famous. It was big news when he left Saturday Night Live and was going to go do his own comedy variety show on ABC, I believe. And he was written up in magazines and newspapers. Everybody's excited about this new show. He lined up an incredible slate of people to be writers or actors on this show. People you had not heard of at the time. Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, Louis C.K., Bob Odenkirk, who's the Breaking Bad guy, Better Call Saul, Robert Smigel, who's a writer for Saturday Night Live and does Triumph the Insult Dog. And he had all these people lined up. This was, at the time, looking back on it, it was an amazing array of comedic writers and actors, but nobody knew hardly any of those names before. Stephen Colbert was living in an apartment with his wife and kid and sweating bullets trying to figure out how he was going to get rent paid next month. Steve Carell was known by nobody. He was doing improv work at somewhere. So these guys, this is their first break. They come together. They're going to help write this variety show, and they funnel all this creativity, all this manic energy, just this desire that we're actually going to be on network TV, and we're going to be working with Dana Carvey. And it's going to be great. And the first episode comes out, and the fans hate it from the very first skit it shows. And I'm not even going to describe the first skit. It's a very troubling skit that's put on the first 5 minutes of the show, airing on primetime ABC. And hearing so a documentary was made about this show because the show only lasted, I think, 6 episodes. This huge show business story got shot down within basically a few minutes of the first episode airing. Even the guys that are interviewed for this documentary say, we're watching this all together when it's airing. And as soon as that first couple skits airs, we're like, what did we just do? And they're all worried that they're never going to work again because this is just...
The Titanic has hit the iceberg.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But the big message, let me back up and say that the documentary is called Too Funny to Fail. And it's a documentary about this show. And it's on Hulu, which is another kind of going on Chris's previous, the Giant Pig recommendation being on Netflix. Mine is on Hulu, so that's how it was distributed. And it's a great documentary because what it does is it explores this idea of people who are incredibly creative, wanting to do something with that creativity, but yet having to still remember that if this is a commercial endeavor where you're trying to attract an audience, they all kind of acknowledge that maybe the creativity kind of got away from them. And they forgot that they're actually putting together something that, is meant to entertain a large audience.
Know your market.
Know your market. That's really what it is.
Know your market and create the product as opposed to have a product and go
Exactly.
find something.
It's almost like the dangers of just throwing a lot of creative people together and say, do whatever you want to do. And then you turn out it doesn't actually meet anybody's needs out in the audience. Now, the documentary does come around and show the positives of it all because, of course, all the people I mentioned that are writers obviously went on to have very, very good careers. And they do give this experience on this short-lived show as one of the reasons why they're able to be where they are now because it gave them some confidence to go out and try some things. It gave them some recognition. But from a business standpoint, to me, as I was watching this, I'm like, wow, I think anybody in a creative profession needs to watch this and just remember that if you're making a business out of creativity, you have to remember your audience. You have to remember that you're there to provide something that an audience can find enjoyment, appreciation from. And it's a cooperative thing. I'm not saying you should sell out everything you do, but just you can't, if you're going to make a TV show just to entertain yourself, then make it and just show it in your own home TV, and that's all you need. It's just an audience of one, and that's it. It could be a podcast. But otherwise, you got to remember your audience, and you've got to remember it's still a commercial endeavor in these places. And I just thought it was a great example. And plus, the documentary is really funny. It's just, you get all these guys talking about their time and experience, and it was a really great show. So I definitely think that balance of creativity, along with being a business, is important to remember on
That's
those.
a good message, for sure.
Okay, Gary.
Okay, mine's a recent TV movie, Flint, Michigan.
Ooh, never heard of it.
It's about the problem with the water
Sure.
in Flint, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And I was channel surfing,
Okay, right.
literally, and watched it for a few minutes, and I said, just like you said, I thought, this is perfect for the Podtacular. Because I would not have watched it at first because I kind of knew the story and didn't think about it.
Sure.
But I'm glad I did because it really talked about, again, it's from a business message, and the city and different people were making decisions with people's lives from a cost standpoint. And the whistleblowers, and they went after the whistleblowers and pushed them to the side, and it's kind of like things we see today, I guess everywhere, where the cover-up's worse than the decision. But they find out that they could have done things much differently, and they even had some decisions that were agreed to by higher-up politicians that they decided not to go with. That would have made it much safer for the people. I mean, it's kind of scary to have watched. I mean, I heard all the headlines and read all the things about it, but you kind of got to live it for those people, and it was a bad.
I wasn't even aware that there was a documentary
so
made.
the name of it is Flint, Michigan?
Flint. It's either Flint or Flint, Michigan.
Okay.
I wrote my note down. But it was really, whether from a quality of a movie standpoint, I'm not sure.
Sure.
But from a message standpoint,
Sure.
I mean, it really hit me and said, my gosh, I mean, and kind of into politics and business or the cost side of it, and people making decisions just from a pure money standpoint that was really tearing up people on a personal level.
It's just, and it's why I'm so thankful that there's so many formats and mediums available for stories like that to be told and for us to get a better insight. Because people going into the business world, I mean, it's one thing to be watching movies about how to market, how to grow, how to be an entrepreneur, how to make money. But I mean, the ethics, the underlying ideas are still so important. Yeah, I was noticing that. Right.
And again, we're talking about business movies, but they're really not. They're movies on ethics, which are part of what we do in our lives.
Well, and the impact of your decisions.
Absolutely.
Well, you brought up a good point that the actual fallout of the decisions they made were actually more damaging to the company than the choices they were making. I mean, by making this poor choice, they actually found themselves in a much, much worse situation than they would have had if they had dealt with it beforehand.
Early
so,
on,
right.
a lower cost, and it would have been much better situations for everybody.
So that's a good lesson as well, just a practical lesson of sometimes it's better to face up to an issue and a problem and deal with it head on than to try to defer, delay, hide, cover back, because the end result will be so much more traumatic. That's why I tell my kids when they try to cover up something, it's like, you just tell me. It'll be bad, but it'll be a whole lot worse if I find out later.
That's exactly
that's right. Yep.
We call it good parenting. Good job.
Yeah, I try.
All right. I was at a conference last month, and the keynote speaker there was a fellow named Brian Hamilton, who is the founder of a data company called SageWorks, and he's a commentator on CNBC, and he was talking to us, and he said, if you ever want to understand the passion and determination of an entrepreneur, you need to watch the documentary Man on Wire, which I'm sure that Alan and Chris have seen. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a movie. It's a documentary about the tightrope walker Philip Petit, who was the person that put up a wire between the trade centers, the World Trade Centers in New York City in 1974, very illegally, and basically walked between them. And it's sort of a combination of interviews and actual footage, and some of it I think is recreated. But if you watch the footage of this guy walking across World Trade Centers, it's eerie, in that they're obviously not there any longer. It's it's frightening, and incredible. But going through his journey to get there, and his passion and his determination and his unwillingness to let anything stop him in this struck Mr. Hamilton as this is the passion of an entrepreneur who is going to go through whatever obstacles, barriers get in his way to accomplish and start a business, grow a business, and those are very much on display in this movie. So it's a very interesting story, and you're probably aware of it, but but to actually see the footage is really quite amazing, and to go through it and to see what they did to actually get the wire across the buildings.
It's pretty crazy.
And it's.
I have a fear of heights, so just
This won't help it.
A little queasy.
But it's a very interesting documentary in its own right. But if you think about it in terms of the passion that the guy exhibited, that's sort of
absolutely. And you hear in business, you hear people say, "Well, we just don't do it that way. That can't be done." And this guy's like, "I'm going to do this." And there, like you said, nothing is going to stop me, and I'm going to do it because I want to do it. And he did. That drive was definitely there. It's just, and I had never, before seeing the documentary, I'd never heard of that. And then at first I was like, this has to be fake. There's no way. And I was like, no, because after I watched the documentary, still went on the internet, looked at him like, no, this really happened. This guy really did this. It's just, there's no way that can be true, but it is. It blows your mind.
It was not fake news. It really
true
happened.
News.
Yeah. So.
So the documentary, I absolutely agree. The documentary is the recommendation you ought to be making. Now there was if somebody's not into documentaries, there was a acted version of the story called The Walk that Robert Zemeckis did just a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, I believe. It's okay. I mean, it's not a great film, I don't think. I'd much rather watch the documentary. But for some people who just would rather see it acted out and more of the story to it, there is a version of it as a movie. Now, if you are afraid of heights, I would not watch that version because they spend quite a bit of time focusing on the visual impact of somebody up on a high wire
So
that
I
high
wouldn't have
up.
been watching it.
No.
Even if I was in the room.
The documentary's better to watch from that standpoint because it doesn't actually put you up there and from that vantage point. But both of them together complete the whole story, but the documentary is definitely the better film of the two, I think. So it's a great recommendation. And now you're not encouraging people to go out and deliberately break the law and pull these stunts, right? I mean,
We're talking about ethics.
Yeah, we are talking ethics. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So
I'm just a student of these things.
Yeah.
I'm not making value judgments at this time. We'll do
Right.
that later.
Right.
So.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Other movies. We have other movie recommendations.
I wrestled with one, but I was concerned that maybe it was going to send the wrong ethics message. But since you just brought up Man on Wire and encouraging people to go break the law and do high wire acts, I guess I'll just mention one more that came to mind for me that I think is kind of a fascinating one too. Catch Me If You Can, which I don't think any of us have mentioned before on this particular format. That's the one with Leonardo DiCaprio playing someone who is well known as a kind of a swindler, kind of a con man. That's how he made his career, basically, for all of his life, going through and impersonating different people and careers and just finding all the ways to get by and cheat the system to get ahead. Now, again, I'm not recommending anybody follow that path, but if you want to talk about somebody with just problem-solving skills and just determination, the movie that Steven Spielberg did about this guy puts him in a light of someone who just wanted initially to make a better life for himself and his family situation. It got away from him. It got way out of control, and it got to a point where, legally it should never have gone. But the determination side of it, if you want to play off of that, I thought was really interesting. And it is something where from a problem-solving standpoint, creative thinking, determination, all of that's there from a business standpoint. Just again, I didn't want to make it one of my top 2 recommendations because, again, didn't want it to be where we're creating con men out of listeners from our show here. But I do think it's a good example of another one that kind of portrays that drive the same way that Man on Wire does. It's kind of this is how I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and watching the mechanics of following through with that. So, yeah. And the fact that the guy now is actually working with the FBI and working with the government to actually help other people spot con men and counterfeiters and all that. So it does end with there is some good that comes out of it, out of the whole experience. Yeah.
All right. You guys have any others that you want to share?
I'm all out.
The only other one I was going to throw out there, and which I enjoyed, it wasn't not award nominated, but a recent movie was The Founder with a story about Ray Kroc that came out in 2016. And I think Michael Keaton stars as Ray Kroc, and it's the story of how he finds this single McDonald's franchise in California as he's selling milkshake machines, and starts to partner with the 2 brothers that own it, and eventually learns about franchising and growing. And while the 2 brothers are more concerned about quality and perfection, he has his own vision, and over time gains control of the company and sort of pushes them out and goes on to great fame and fortune as an entrepreneur. It's sort of your entrepreneur story that we've all heard and grappled with, from Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg to Jeff Bezos of just
Jeff Neuville.
No, I was going to say, but some ethical dilemmas there of what are you willing to do to succeed, and choices that you're going to make. I think I have a soft spot for this movie, in that I was very disappointed that Michael Keaton didn't get the best best actor for Birdman, and that bugs me still.
I'm with you.
I really liked him in that.
Yeah.
And I'm a Michael Keaton fan.
Yes.
So enjoyed that movie.
Can I ask you a question, Jeff, just on that? Because I'm personally very, very angry with myself for not thinking of that film, because that would have been an obvious choice for me for this year.
Too obvious for you.
Well,
now.
we showed it at our Film Society screenings early in the year.
With you guys.
That's right. Brought it with your program. I mean, it was just an obvious pick. We should have brought it up. But the thing, I got in a conversation with somebody about that film, Ray Kroc, the whole character study of him and his business ethics. If you look at things, he didn't do anything illegally in the business world. Mm-hmm. He played by the rules on paper and the boundaries available to him. So some people I've talked to said, well, I don't really see Ray Kroc as a bad. I mean, the movie kind of paints him as a little bit of a bad guy by the end. Yeah. Outside of the whatever he may have been doing with his wife or all that, taking the personal stuff aside. Right. On the business side, some people I talk to find just as much fault with the original McDonald brothers for not being more cooperative and not being more open-minded and not being more, looking at opportunities. And it really was a story of 2 completely different approaches to business, just completely splitting. The McDonald brothers, I'm just going to be, I don't know, I'm probably going to get some hate mail on this, but the McDonald brothers, created a great restaurant and a great service and a great culture for that organization. But you guys admit, Ray Kroc, for whatever harm you think McDonald's as a multi-million-dollar or a billion-dollar corporation has, they've also given so much back out and supported things in the community and hired so many people and created so many jobs. I can't come out of the movie saying who's a bad guy, who's a good guy. I mean, I think the movie definitely played his faults a little bit more. But from a business standpoint, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it when I walk away from the movie.
Well, perhaps the business lesson is really be careful who you partner with, just to make sure that your goals and visions are in alignment.
Yeah,
because
that's a good idea.
They obviously were not with this, and that the 2 McDonald's brothers were very content having one good restaurant, or maybe they would have been content having 5 good restaurants, and that was not Ray Kroc's ambition. His was to be worldwide, and
I think that is a great message. Because getting started, understand the personalities and the
Yeah.
goals of the people you're dealing with. Because when you're first getting started, you have those rose-colored glasses. Well, yeah, he doesn't do it the same way I do, but it'll all work out. But it doesn't always work out.
Doesn't always work out.
I have no ill will against McDonald's. So I sort of assume if McDonald's wasn't here, we'd be eating more cheeseburgers from somebody else.
Somebody else would have filled that spot. You're right.
And you know that I start every day with a 32-ounce Coke and a 32-ounce iced tea from McDonald's.
So you're
$2.14.
perfect.
Breakfast of champions.
Dunkin' Donuts is mine, so that's where my coffee comes from. So yeah, I know the
All
feeling.
right. Well, we've given you lots of movie choices to hopefully get through your holidays, and we do wish everyone happy holidays
Absolutely.
there. But we also like to end with some small businesses that you should be checking out, and we invited Chris and Alan to share some of their small business ideas. So, Chris, you have a small business that you'd like to share with us.
I do. I was attending a benefit for the March of Dimes recently, and they have all sorts of food tables and stuff out there. And one of the tables was actually, they were giving out cocktails with bourbon. I was like, oh, that's cool. That looks nice. And then the guy was, talking and handing out business cards. I was like, wait a second, you're actually local, made in North Carolina. That kind of blew my mind. Sure enough, in Conover, 1712 Spirits. They have a website. They've got a blog that has recipes and stuff you can make.
Make your own bourbon?
Not make your own bourbon, but take their bourbon and make your own cocktails.
Oh man,
I mean, I was fascinated by that. I think, we had the trend in North Carolina. We've done the wineries, and then we've done breweries, all of which are excellent, And now, to me, I'm like, okay, this is another way that's going to start up. It's like distilleries making, in this case, bourbon, but then, who knows? Maybe some people will make vodka in North Carolina. Who knows?
Get gambling, prostitution.
But they do distillery tours as well. On Saturdays, you can go by and have a tour of the distillery, and I think they give you a shot glass at the end of the tour. So, Southern Spirits, 1712 Southern Spirits is the name of the company. It's in Conover, North Carolina, and they've got a website and everything. So.
I'll have to check that out. It's where I live. I don't know where it is. Of course, Conover is a really big place.
Right, it's sprawling, absolutely.
It's about as big as this room.
but they're doing some really Conover, Newton, that whole area around us, and doing some really great things with some of their downtown and business development efforts. I think they're really trying to embrace some new startups. That's really cool to hear that one there. So I'm a bourbon guy, so
Check it out.
feverishly have been taking notes while you've been talking here. So, yeah.
All right, Alan, what small business do you want to?
So mine's not local. It's a national one that anybody could actually take advantage of, no matter where you're listening to this. I'm a big fan of businesses that decide to disrupt existing business channels. And I feel bad sometimes giving these recommendations or talking about these online companies that make things simpler and easier to get some of the goods and services we need, because I do realize that sometimes this maybe cuts out some middlemen and other groups. But I also am a firm believer that, businesses need to make sure they're accommodating the times and they're growing with the times and they're meeting a changing dynamic in our society, which is we want things a little more conveniently. We want to be able to kind of work things into our own schedules. The world isn't necessarily set on an 8 to 5 schedule for everything anymore. So contact lenses are a really big hang up for me. I wear them, but as those of you around the table can see, I'm not wearing them right now. I'm wearing my glasses because these contacts keep bothering me and they're just uncomfortable. And ordering them is just sometimes a pain because I feel like I have to go in and set up an appointment and I got to go get them checked out and then I got to place the order, get my prescriptions and so on and so forth. So even though I feel like I need to be changing contacts more often than I am, it's more of a problem of not wanting to just because of the time involved to do it. So I use glasses a lot more. But there's actually a website now called Simple Contacts, and I read up on the company, and I mean, they're doing some innovative things, much like we've seen companies do with mattresses, or we've seen things with shaving kits. It's this whole idea of let us find a much easier, more economical way to get you these things as a consumer. With Simple Contacts is actually an app you install on your phone, and you can do an eye chart test from your phone, so you can get your prescription verified there. Before you think that I'm cutting out doctors and eye doctors, it's not. And they're very clear to say that, we do not take the place of a regular eye exam because we do not check for potential eye diseases or anything at all wrong with your eyes. All we're doing right now is making sure you've got a validated prescription so you can quickly order new contacts and you make sure everything's going to work. I'm like, that's perfect for me. I still want to go to the eye doctor once a year or so and get an eye check done. But in the meantime, if I just want to get some new contacts or I want to check my prescription, see if anything needs to be updated, I can do that now through this business that started up just recently. So it's simplecontacts.com, I believe, is actually the website. It is an app on the App Store for iPhone. I'm sure it's for Android as well. But simplecontacts.com is the website if you want to read more about it, exactly how it works and what they do. They have professionals reviewing all of the prescription orders on the backside when you submit them, based on photographs it takes of your eyes when you use your phone and the eye test you take to validate everything. So it's not just all completely automated. There's a little bit of some medical experience involved to review it. But again, I love the fact that we have these opportunities and businesses are starting up these ways of finding ways to better connect with consumers. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't mean it to be a disruption to existing businesses, but I also feel like existing businesses need to kind of make sure they're adapting their services to meet the times as well. So
be changing with what's
that's right.
going on.
So Simple Contacts, I think, just started up in the last year, and I'm excited to kind of give them a whirl and see how that goes. So,
All right. Well, good deal.
Yeah,
Very good.
All right, Gary, what you got?
Well, mine is a not-for-profit. It's called Blue Line Bears. This is a not-for-profit organization with the goal of helping children of fallen law enforcement officers. And it was started by a 14-year-old girl wanting to reach out to the children of fallen officers and make them feel better and see that people were caring about them. It's just starting, and it's very small, but it was really a cool thing I saw on TV. I saw it twice in 2 days, and I decided, I think once Fox, once on CBS. I said, well, that's about equal.
you get nice coverage all across the board. Yeah.
So obviously it was a good, real thing. A 15-year-old girl saying she wants to help the children. She's actually getting uniforms from the fallen officers, and they're making teddy bears out of them.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
Emblems, and if they've got if they're a sergeant, those type of things, and doing that, and then she sends it back out. And the last thing, that, along with the bear, they give a St. Michael's medal, blessed by a priest, before they mail it to the family. So it's cool. Very small, not for profit, but really a great cause.
Well,
when you think about a 15-year-old,
that's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you're building awareness. You're building a better connection with kids and police officers and the police force. I mean, it's just, and you're recognizing and those that have fallen in duty. It's great, and started by a kid too. That's awesome. That's always good to hear.
Good job. All right. Well, my small business of the month is the winner of our regional business plan competition, which we have in this part of North Carolina, called the Edison Project. It's a company called Foothills Digest, which is a magazine and website devoted to the Foothills region of North Carolina, which really stretches from our area here in Catawba County down towards Charlotte, North Carolina, and up north, up to Boone and Blowing Rock. And it was founded by a local designer and photographer whose name is Carmen Eckerd. And she entered and won our Edison project competition back in November, and she is receiving $10,000 in funding towards her business. And of note, the Mesh Podcast Network is a former winner of the Edison competition.
Yes.
It's old school to put out a magazine these days, but Carmen and her team really put together an outstanding business plan. They're targeting local markets, local readers. It's a very high-quality magazine focusing on the Foothills area, history, art, activity, beautiful photography. They've already put out their first edition. They're working with local travel groups to get circulation out there. They've sold advertising. She's done all the work to figure out what her break even is in terms of the advertising she has to sell, and so far she is exceeding that. So she did a great job in our competition. So we want to give Foothills Digest a shout out and encourage people to go visit them, and they can do that online at foothills.media/digest, and you can see about the magazine. You can subscribe to the magazine if you'd like. You can see some of the articles for free online. But, it's the holiday time. You also get a subscription to
It's
the
a great
magazine.
choice.
So,
Well, I was going to say on that too, you made the comment about, the magazines maybe being a more kind of traditional form of communication. And some people question magazines in today's digital world. But when you've got a publication that's so visual, I mean, the photography and all that, it's kind of like Our State Magazine, which, is North Carolina, a very popular magazine. That magazine, I think, will stay around for a very long time because people like when it's a visual and something you want to have in your house and you want to have for you and for guests to read. That kind of publication I don't think is going to go away in the digital world. I still think you're going to have that published hands-on type of experience, especially because it's so visually based. I think that's really important.
I agree.
So,
and small businesses, we're putting them in the cosmetology school at CVCC for the waiting room because
Right.
they have a salon.
There you go.
that's great.
Well, I want to thank Alan and Chris for joining us again for another Podtacular holiday extravaganza podcast. We look forward to doing it again next year.
Yeah, because we hate talking about movies.
I know.
How dare you bring us in to talk about movies for an hour?
Our listeners out there, if you have ideas for the small business of the month, you can send them to us at exchange@themesh.tv. We want to thank the Mesh Network for hosting us. You can go out to themesh.tv and see the entire, all the podcasts that are part of the network there. So please check that out. You can download us at themesh.tv. You can subscribe to iTunes. So please do that. We wish you great holiday seasons, and we'll look forward to talking with you again early in 2018.
Happy holidays.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.